In the darkest corners of America's prison system, some gang members stand apart, not just for their crimes on the streets, but for the brutal violence they unleashed behind prison walls. These are the men who didn't just rise through gang ranks, but crossed lines so deadly that even life behind bars wasn't punishment enough. Sentenced to death for acts of murder, torture, and orchestrating gang wars from their cells, these inmates represent the most extreme examples of gang violence in the U.S. penal system. Their stories are chilling, their paths marked by bloodshed, and for them, the last stop is death row. Number 5. Ronnie Fuston, the Trigger of Terror. Inside the life of a 107 Hoover Crip. In the streets of Oklahoma City, where neighborhood tensions simmered and gang lines were clearly drawn, a young man would etch his name into the annals of criminal infamy. His name, Ronnie Eugene Fuston. Known on the streets as a ruthless member of the 107 Hoover Crips, Fuston wasn't just another foot soldier in the gang war. He was a self-proclaimed executioner, unapologetic and remorseless. Born and raised in the heart of Oklahoma, Ronnie Fuston was no stranger to violence. From a young age, the allure of gang life gripped him tightly. The 107th Hoover Crips, a set of the larger Hoover criminals' umbrella, an extension of Los Angeles gang culture, had grown roots in the Oklahoma gang scene. They were known for their deep rivalries, especially with blood-affiliated gangs and other Crip factions. By the time he was in his early 20s, Fuston had already carved out a reputation. He wasn't just feared, he was unpredictable. But it was the events of March 2012 that would forever seal his name in Oklahoma's criminal history. That month, Dajuan Marquise Jones, a 20-year-old with alleged ties to a rival gang, was sitting in his car in Oklahoma City when Fuston approached. In broad daylight, without hesitation, Fuston opened fire. Jones was shot multiple times, executed in cold blood. No robbery, no argument, just a message. A gang hit, motivated by territory and reputation. Witnesses were horrified, and the community left shaken. But Fuston wasn't finished. In 2013, while the investigation into the Jones murder remained active, another body dropped. This time, it was Jordan Norris, a 19-year-old. The shooting bore the same hallmarks: brutality, efficiency, and the eerie calm of a killer at peace with his actions. Authorities now believed they had a pattern, a gang soldier turned serial enforcer. But even behind bars, Ronnie Fuston wasn't done sending shockwaves. While in custody awaiting trial, Fuston's jail conversations, monitored and recorded, revealed the mind of a man who wore his crimes like badges of honor. He didn't whisper about the murders, he boasted about them. He spoke of how he walked up and shot Jones in the face, how killing made him feel powerful. He even laughed about his ability to silence witnesses as if daring the justice system to stop him. These recorded conversations became key pieces of evidence. In 2016, Ronnie Fuston stood trial for the murder of Dajuan Jones. Prosecutors didn't hold back. They painted a picture of a gang hitman, someone who killed not out of desperation, but out of devotion to his set, to the 107 Hoover Crips, and to the violent code they lived by. The defense tried to cast doubt, but the mountain of evidence, from ballistics to jailhouse recordings, was insurmountable. The verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Ronnie Fuston was sentenced to death, a rare penalty in Oklahoma reserved for the most calculated and remorseless of killers. And in his sentencing, the judge cited Fuston's pride in his actions as one of the driving reasons. Today, Fuston sits on Oklahoma's death row, his fate sealed. But his story serves as a chilling reminder of the extent gang violence can reach. He wasn't a kingpin or a drug lord. He was a street soldier, but one with a killer instinct and no moral compass. Ronnie Fuston is more than a name in the gangland archives of Oklahoma. He is a symbol of how dangerous loyalty to the street can become. His story is a cautionary tale, a portrait of youth corrupted by power, and the devastating legacy that gang life can leave behind. Number 4. Michael Lamb, Public Enemy, Inside the Life of a PENI Enforcer. In the murky shadows of America's prison yards and the chaotic streets of Southern California, one gang emerged with a reputation as volatile as it was feared. Public Enemy Number 1, also known as PENI. At the heart of this white supremacist hybrid street prison gang stood violent men who lived by a ruthless code. Among them was Michael Lamb, a name whispered in fear, associated with bloodshed, intimidation, and the extreme ideology of a gang with no boundaries. Michael Lamb was not just a member of PENI, he was a driving force behind its violent ascent. Born and raised in Southern California, Lamb came up during a time when methamphetamine was flooding communities, white supremacist gangs were reorganizing, and prison politics were merging with street operations. By the early 2000s, Lamb had fully committed himself to the cause of PENI, a gang that had originated in Orange County jails in the 1980s. What set PENI apart was its dual nature, acting as both a street gang and a proxy for the Aryan Brotherhood behind prison walls. Members like Lamb served as enforcers, drug traffickers, and ideological soldiers. And Michael wasn't just another foot soldier. He was a loyal, cunning operator who moved with a level of savagery that even rival gangs recognized. Inside prison, Lamb was respected by allied white gangs and feared by enemies. He rose in influence by doing the Aryan Brotherhood's dirty work, collecting debts, intimidating witnesses, and when necessary, killing those who defied gang law. He wasn't loud or flashy. He operated quietly but effectively. Corrections officers noted that wherever Lamb was housed, violence seemed to follow. Stabbings, beatings, coordinated assaults. Outside prison walls, Michael Lamb played a key role in extending PENI's drug trade across Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties. Methamphetamine was the lifeblood of the gang's criminal enterprise, and Lamb was deeply involved in distributing it, collecting street taxes, and organizing crews. He was known for his discipline and for enforcing a strict code of conduct among PENI members. Disloyalty, drug debt, or disrespect could cost you your life. But Lamb's loyalty to the cause went beyond business. He fully embraced the white supremacist ideology that fueled PENI's violent ethos. He adorned himself with racist tattoos, including swastikas and runes, which served as both warnings and symbols of his allegiance. To law enforcement, Michael Lamb represented a new kind of gang threat, one that blurred the lines between prison gang politics, white supremacy, and large-scale narcotics operations. In 2010, Lamb's criminal empire began to crumble. Federal agents had been investigating PENI under RICO statutes, and Lamb's name came up repeatedly in connection to meth trafficking, extortion, and orchestrated prison assaults. He was arrested in a massive multi-agency sweep targeting Public Enemy Number 1 members. The charges were serious: conspiracy to commit murder, distribution of narcotics, and gang enhancement crimes that could lock him away for decades. Behind bars once again, Lamb found himself deeper than ever in the politics of prison gang life. But despite his high rank and violent resume, he remained a loyal soldier rather than a defector. Unlike others who flipped under pressure, Lamb stayed silent, earning respect in the white gang hierarchy and solidifying his role as a key PENI figure. Today, Michael Lamb remains incarcerated, a lifer in a system where loyalty can be as dangerous as betrayal. His name is etched into the legacy of PENI, not just as a violent enforcer, but as a believer in a cause built on hatred, hierarchy, and fear. His story is one of transformation, of how a young man from California became a symbol of white supremacist gang violence, and a reminder of how prison walls often create more dangerous men than they contain. Number 3. Todd Given, the shadow of the Nazi lowriders. Inside the violent corridors of California's prison system, one gang rose from the ashes of chaos with a singular mission: control through fear, loyalty, and white supremacy. That gang was the Nazi lowriders, and one of its most dangerous enforcers was a man named Todd Given. Givens wasn't a name you'd hear on the news. He didn't seek attention. But in prison yards from Folsom to Pelican Bay, his name carried weight. Feared by inmates and respected by shot callers, Todd Given lived and breathed the violent code of the Nazi lowriders, a gang that operated like a paramilitary force inside and outside the walls. Formed in the 1970s and rising to power in the 1990s, the Nazi lowriders, often called NLR, were more than just a white prison gang. They were an elite faction, a stepping stone to the Aryan Brotherhood. And Givens was handpicked to rise. Born and raised in Southern California, Givens grew up surrounded by the street politics of race and violence. By the time he was in his early 20s, he had already been in and out of jail, collecting assault charges and drug offenses. But it was inside prison that Givens found purpose. The NLR recognized his potential early, his discipline, his violence, and above all, his loyalty. Inside the gang, Todd Given quickly moved from prospect to shot caller. He became known for his ability to organize assaults, carry out orders without hesitation, and enforce discipline within the ranks. He wasn't a loudmouth, he wasn't reckless. Given was tactical and lethal. He played a critical role in coordinating attacks on rival gang members, particularly Black and Hispanic inmates. He also handled green lights, hits on anyone who violated gang rules or cooperated with law enforcement. Several high-profile prison stabbings were linked to orders that originated from his tier. Though difficult to prove, corrections officers and investigators knew the signature. Quiet, brutal, and clean. But Given's influence wasn't limited to prison yards. He was heavily involved in the NLR's street operations, especially methamphetamine trafficking across Southern California. The gang used their prison connections to manage a lucrative drug network, and Given served as a liaison, communicating with outside members, laundering money, and managing supply chains through coded messages and trusted intermediaries. In 2002, the FBI and state authorities launched a massive RICO investigation into the NLR. They had spent years building a case, flipping low-level members and monitoring phone calls. Todd Given was one of the key targets. Though never the top leader, he was the kind of enforcer that made the gang function, cold, committed, and dangerous. He was eventually indicted on a series of charges: conspiracy to commit murder, drug trafficking, and gang enhancement violations. During his trial, prosecutors presented wiretaps, confidential witness testimony, and years of prison records showing his deep involvement in the Nazi lowriders' internal structure. Inmates testified, often anonymously, about Given's role in beatings, stabbings, and drug operations. In 2005, Todd Given was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was transferred to a supermax facility where he remains today. Even in isolation, his name continues to carry influence among younger NLR members seeking to prove themselves. Todd Given lived by a code rooted in hate, discipline, and unflinching loyalty. In the world of the Nazi lowriders, he was a soldier, a teacher, and a killer. His legacy isn't just written in court records, it's etched into prison walls, whispered through steel bars, and echoed in every act of violence committed under the NLR banner. In the end, Todd Given became what the gang had trained him to be: a ghost in the system, unseen, unforgiving, and unforgettable. Number 2. Christian Cavazos, Rise and Fall of a 10K Gang General. In the depths of South Texas, where cartel influence seeps across the border and gang rivalries dominate the streets, a new generation of gangsters has emerged, more violent, more organized, and more connected. Among the most feared was the 10K Gang, and at the center of their deadly rise was a man named Christian Cavazos. Cavazos wasn't a household name, but in cities like McAllen, Mission, and Brownsville, his reputation was carved in blood. Known on the streets as a leader, a shooter, and an enforcer, Christian Cavazos quickly climbed the ranks of the 10K Gang, a hybrid street organization deeply entrenched in drug trafficking, extortion, and murder. The 10K Gang, short for 10,000, wasn't just a local clique. Formed in the early 2000s, it evolved from a loose group of street-level hustlers into a deadly faction that aligned itself with major Mexican cartels. Their goal? Control the Rio Grande Valley's lucrative drug routes and dominate local street-level distribution with fear and firepower. Cavazos was one of the earliest members to show a combination of loyalty, brutality, and leadership that made him invaluable. Born into poverty and raised in a neighborhood dominated by crime, Christian Cavazos found brotherhood in the 10K Gang. By his late teens, he was already carrying out shootings, collecting drug debts, and running crews. He wasn't the type to brag, but he didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than any reputation. Law enforcement first took serious notice of Cavazos in 2016, when a string of drive-by shootings left several rival gang members dead or wounded. Witnesses refused to talk. Surveillance footage was scarce. But in the underground, the word was out. Cavazos was behind it. He wasn't just a shooter, he was the shot caller, and he had no fear of consequences. What made Cavazos truly dangerous was his connection to the cartels across the border. He served as a trusted middleman between Mexican traffickers and local U.S. gangs, helping move shipments of methamphetamine, heroin, and fentanyl through South Texas and into major cities like Houston and Dallas. These weren't small-time deals. This was big business, and Cavazos was at the center. But with power came heat. In 2019, federal authorities launched a sweeping investigation into 10K Gang operations. Dubbed Operation Lone Wolf, the investigation targeted high-ranking gang members, and Christian Cavazos quickly became one of the main targets. Wiretaps, informants, and surveillance finally gave agents the evidence they needed. In 2020, Cavazos was arrested during a joint raid by DEA, Homeland Security, and local task forces. The charges were serious: conspiracy to distribute narcotics, racketeering, money laundering, and ordering multiple acts of gang-related violence. During the arrest, agents seized weapons, cash, encrypted phones, and a ledger believed to contain drug transactions and names of hit targets. In court, prosecutors painted Cavazos as a rising kingpin of the 10K Gang, someone who had not only ordered hits, but personally carried them out. They described a man who lived in the shadows but held power like a cartel boss. His defense team tried to argue mistaken identity and lack of physical evidence, but the digital trail and cooperating witnesses told a different story. In 2022, Christian Cavazos was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. He is currently housed in a high-security facility far from the streets he once ruled. Christian Cavazos represents a new breed of gang leadership, one that blurs the lines between local street violence and transnational organized crime. His life, now behind bars, serves as a chilling reminder of how quickly ambition and violence can build an empire, and how quickly it can all fall apart. From the streets of South Texas to the cold walls of a federal cell, the legacy of Christian Cavazos is still being written. Number 1. Cory Smith, the face of South Florida's John Doe Gang. In the underworld of South Florida's criminal landscape, one gang emerged from the shadows, faceless, nameless, and nearly invisible to law enforcement for years. They called themselves the John Doe Gang, a name as cryptic as their movements. And leading them into infamy was a man whose name would soon strike fear across Miami-Dade and Broward counties, Cory Smith. Cory Smith was born and raised in Liberty City, one of Miami's toughest neighborhoods, an area plagued by generational poverty, drug wars, and gang turf battles. Smith grew up fast. By age 13, he was already being watched by local police. By 16, he was fully entrenched in the life. He didn't just adapt to the streets, he thrived in them. The John Doe Gang started out as a loose clique of young robbers and drug dealers known more for their masked home invasions than for structured operations. But it was Cory Smith who gave the group organization, hierarchy, and fearsome direction. Under his leadership, the John Does evolved into a violent, calculated criminal enterprise. They adopted anonymity as a tactic, wearing masks, avoiding tattoos, and using burner phones, making them nearly impossible to track. Between 2013 and 2019, the John Doe Gang waged a bloody campaign in South Florida. They clashed with rival gangs in Overtown, Little Haiti, and Fort Lauderdale, engaging in drive-by shootings, ambushes, and even coordinated robberies of drug stash houses. At the center of it all was Cory Smith, calculating, quiet, and cold-blooded. Smith had an unmatched ability to move in silence. He never used social media. He didn't drive flashy cars. And unlike many gang leaders, he stayed in the trenches. He was known to carry out hits personally, especially if the target had disrespected the crew. This hands-on approach earned him unwavering loyalty from his members, many of whom called him Ghost. But behind the loyalty was a reign of terror. Smith was tied to at least 8 homicides, including the broad daylight execution of a rival in North Miami and a retaliatory killing in the parking lot of a nightclub. He enforced a strict code within the gang: no cooperation, no weakness, and no mercy. Those who disobeyed were greenlit or disappeared entirely. Law enforcement agencies, including the ATF and FBI, launched a multi-year investigation into the John Doe Gang. But the gang's faceless nature made it nearly impossible to penetrate. Witnesses refused to talk. Surveillance footage often revealed masked shooters. And Cory Smith? He was like a ghost, always a step ahead. That changed in 2020 when a former gang member turned informant provided federal agents with inside details: names, drop locations, drug routes, and most importantly, Cory Smith's role in orchestrating murders and trafficking operations. A sweeping RICO indictment followed. In 2021, Smith was arrested in a high-stakes raid by U.S. Marshals in a quiet suburb outside Atlanta. Authorities recovered firearms, encrypted phones, and large quantities of fentanyl and cocaine. The indictment painted him as the undisputed leader of the John Doe Gang, a man who ruled with fear and whose fingerprints were on nearly every act of violence committed by the crew. In 2023, Cory Smith stood trial in federal court. The evidence was overwhelming. Recorded phone calls, ballistic matches, and damning testimony from former associates sealed his fate. He was found guilty on multiple counts of racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, drug trafficking, and firearm possession. He was sentenced to life in federal prison. Today, Cory Smith sits in a high-security federal penitentiary, his voice silenced, but his impact still echoing through the streets of South Florida. The John Doe Gang may have started as a nameless crew, but under Smith, it became one of the most feared criminal organizations in the region. A ghost in the system, a mastermind in the streets. Cory Smith's story is a stark reminder of what happens when leadership meets lawlessness.